Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Define the Narrative podcast. My name is Argo. Thank you for joining us. I know it's been a minute since our last episode. We hope that you all had a great holiday and that you fared our Omicron wave and are back in the swing of things. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to have Mali Bain joining us. She is going to share with us about the anthology that she has put together that launches tomorrow, is going to be published, called Choosing Single Parenthood. Mali, thank you for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for welcoming me.
Absolutely. Mali, there's so many things about this anthology that we want to share about it. But one thing that you shared with me is you wanted in particular to have Canadian women. What made you decide that you specifically wanted to have Canadian women in this anthology?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I am a Canadian woman myself. And when I began doing the research about whether I wanted to become a choice mom or not, and learning about the pathway to being a choice parent, I found myself relying mostly on resources from the US and a bit from Australia. And I wanted to just hear more stories from folks in Canada. I just thought we might have some things in common, perhaps, and I was surprised that there weren't more. So when it came time to put some stories together, I thought that's the angle that I'd like to start with, is asking women from Canada. In the end, the stories are quite universal. However, it was meaningful to me to have stories from this part of the world.
Universal, yet still quite diverse, right? That deep culture of all the different aspects that we all have to challenge. And we were joking before we started recording. They were two white women. We were in our late 30s. It's the common story. And I'm like, even us, we have our own trials and tribulations that make this journey something that I don't think we could over document. I think the more we document it, the more we come together and the more we build community, it will be that much more meaningful in the future. Tell us about what part of Canada, how you grew up, what your family was like, and what it was like when you decided to take this route to motherhood.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a very small town on northern Vancouver Island. It's on the far west coast of Canada, a town of 3,000 people, and spent the many years based out of Vancouver. I did a lot of work around the world as well as in Vancouver, and honestly always thought that the sort of traditional route would end up working out for me eventually. And wasn't sure that I wanted to be a parent, to be honest. It was something I was unclear on until I had a major head injury, a concussion, when I was in my late 30s. And I was suddenly completely immobilized. It was a bit like a pandemic lockdown without the pandemic around me. So it forced me to stay home and not do much for a long time. And all of that thinking and reflection got me thinking about what I wanted to do with my future. And I realized I really did want to be a parent. So I come from a somewhat conservative religious family myself. And at first, I think my parents and my family had questions. However, once my child came into the world, they were very supportive. And yeah, and people have been amazing. People have been so supportive the whole way through. But I now have moved back to Vancouver Island. So I'm back on Vancouver Island, and my daughter is 2.5 years old.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I know. I think sometimes we go for a little bit and then come back and find our different pathways. And I can concur. I know that I met my challenges with my family. But the minute that he was on his way, that was all that mattered. And it's been just magical love ever since then. And I think too, that's a point, I should do a poll sometimes. Coming from the deep south of the United States, I was anticipating unfavorable feedback. I have yet to this day had anything other than, wow, that's awesome. You're so brave and such a good mom and good for you. I think that's one of the things that keeps me going.
That's a great point. And I'm glad you raised that, because actually the neat thing about having 15 stories and reading them all at once is you get a chance to think about some themes. And that actually is a theme now that you name it. Like, I think there is more trepidation in advance of what people might think, but once we're actually parents, I think all of these stories are the same in that regard, right? We have our various concerns in advance. Once we're a parent, those concerns are no longer relevant, no longer a big part of our lives. So
absolutely,
it's inspiring to know that, especially for those who are considering, right, who are worried about these things.
It is.
Yeah.
And I do want to dig into the different stories because there are 15 of them, one of them being your story. I do wonder if part of it is the fear of something different. I think, universally in our country here in the United States and globally, the fear of doing things that are considered not traditional. And I think that's why I like to define the narrative, because I don't want to be antithetical to history. I think if we start from scratch and have no assumptions that what we're doing is anything other than what we're doing, and it's not in comparison to anything else or a threat to anything else, and that we're doing well and our children are doing well. I know that by the time my son is an adult, that there will be enough history of this just being something that everyone accepts. So we're trudging that road to build some genealogical history for that single parenthood. So let's get into it. Tell us about how you got the stories, and let's talk about some of the different stories that you have in the anthology.
Yeah, sure. So I had the idea, like I say, when I was considering choice parenthood, I wish there had been more stories, both more stories from Canada and more. I wanted like a lot of stories. I didn't want to have to read a whole book. Sometimes I didn't want to just read a bunch of stories. So I put out a call to choice moms in Canada in a Facebook group called Choice Moms Canada. And I asked people to submit just 1,000, 1,500 words. And at that point, I thought I would be able to choose some and not choose others. I ended up saying yes to them all. We got some volunteer editors involved and so on. But some really beautiful stories, a whole range of stories from coast to coast, and all sorts of different diversities within them that we can talk about more.
Which story did you feel was most similar to yours, and in what ways?
That's a really interesting question. I haven't thought about which one was most similar to mine. I think there were some, maybe that because part of it is that each of them, I resonated with them a different way. Like there was something like in every story, I'm just flipping through it right now. And one of them, said, I've tried to find Mr. Right for some time now, but it just hasn't been in the cards for me to this point. And I was like, oh yeah, I recognize that. The timing piece for sure. And then I think, so I saw myself in different ones of these stories. And actually Samia's story is one that I recognize myself in, maybe because I come from a Christian, somewhat conservative Christian family. Hers is somewhat conservative Muslim family. I was inspired by her story and by her throughout our process because her family wasn't supportive of the idea. They became, spoiler alert, they became very supportive when the child was in the world. I really appreciated the way she speaks about that process and the emotional journey of having to navigate family perspectives on something that is still very personal.
And was there a moment in her story where she had to do what she had to do and let the cards fall where they may?
Pretty much. I think, she said, can I read you a little thing of what she says?
Absolutely, please do.
She says, I realized that was not their fault. They were brought up and entangled in a society that frowned upon such decisions. They had to find a way to exist in society while also understanding my decision. So I was not ashamed of my decision because that would mean I was ashamed of my children. So she really stood up, like she really understood who she was. She has such strength. In the end, she says here, my family loves my children, maybe even more than me. They cannot get enough of them. It brings me an element of peace, and there's peace in her writing on it. That's it's an amazing story to be able to read. And I'm so grateful that she shared it.
And I am sure that there are other women who come from Muslim families that it will be that source of inspiration. So thank you to her. What is there a story that stuck out to you more than others, not necessarily in its totality, but for any particular reason, a certain uniqueness or extreme aspect to it?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple. One that was just really, a couple that were compelling to me were really beyond the nuclear family in ways that I hadn't imagined. So one woman, she says she's a 41-year-old single mom. And she has a 24-year-old son as a single mom by chance, and also a single mom by choice with a 3-year-old daughter. And I just thought, wow, how amazing to have gone through the journey of being a single mom once and then to do it again, almost 20 years later.
And choose it.
and choose it, right? So that's beautiful. Like I really admired that and hadn't expected to read that journey. And similarly, another one that was really beyond the nuclear family for me was a mother who is actually almost like a foster parent slash aunt to her niece and nephew. Of her sister's children. And again, so she is both a co-foster parent to her niece and nephew and still a parent to her children, and also had her mother living with her for a while. Just the amount of family and caregiving that one woman was able to take on was remarkable to me. So those two really kind of expanded the definition for me of what a single parent family could look like.
Because when we decide, we usually choose how it's going to be, right? And I know for me, the expanding idea is now there's double donors, right? And for me, when I struggled. I had poor ovarian reserve, and for me, egg donation was kind of out of reach for me at that time. And now I know that it's a large part of the community, but it's still that one pathway. And I think what you're describing is women it is the true mixture of more than one way of motherhood and parenting, right?
Yeah.
Of it not being just limited to whatever that one pathway is, even if different from someone else's. That's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny you say double donor. It's interesting. It's an important thing, I think, if we're considering choice parenthood, to think about what our options are going forward. If our own pregnancy doesn't work with our own eggs, where we go next. And there are two moms in this anthology who are double donor twin parents. And I just thought, what are the chances that we have two of these women telling their story in very different ways and emphasizing different aspects, but just shows again that there's a large community of double donor moms. I don't know how large the community is of double donor twin moms. However, beautiful to hear some of those stories.
And I think it does just speak to that idea of, wanting to nurture and parent. And that brings me to another question that I have. I really appreciate the name of your anthology, that you use the word parenthood rather than motherhood. I know it is semantics, but I know that there is beginning to be a lot of diversity and intentionality. Different people feel very strongly about terminology. And I do believe that it's an important conversation to have because of the connotation, right? Like single mom by choice, that is great. But, single, and I think even mother, because I have found myself saying in life, I'm an only parent, right? Because it's like, who's to say, I don't, people say, oh, you're the mother and the father. And I'm like, well, I don't want to take away from men. Like, fatherhood is something that men get to experience, but I'm the only parent, just like he's an only child. It's not that he's the brother and the sister, right? And so was there a lot of thought behind parenthood for you using that word?
There was a lot of debate on title. I had a really hard time choosing the title, to be honest. Parenthood was important to me. I didn't put motherhood out as an option because of what you're speaking to, because of gender diversity. We have a binary around gender in our society, but not everyone falls into that binary. So I wanted to open that up, and also wanted to leave a lot of space for those who identify as men to be in the anthology. I put out the word pretty far as I could within networks, and didn't have anyone who both had the energy, resources, and courage to share that story just now, but they are there. And so I think I wanted to open up that space a bit more for those who decide to go through surrogacy, for example, as a way to solo parenthood. That's a valid path and an important path to honor. So I kept the name parenthood for that inclusivity reason, even though in the end, all of the folks in the book all identify as women. But I felt it was important. And also because there's something for me about parenthood versus motherhood connotation wise. There's a mom culture that sometimes I really love, and sometimes I don't feel like I quite fit into. So,
well, first of all, I love the fact that you are opening up the conversation to including men, and it just speaks to how quickly the development of of parenthood is changing with surrogacy. And I know, for example, with my son, he has a willing to be known donor. And I know we're the third family. We know the first, second, and fourth family. Two of them are same-sex families, and one of them is a woman like I am. And I notice a difference in, it's the only parent. I do think that parenting as an individual versus parenting or co-parenting in whatever form or fashion, I do believe that there's a wanting to connect, because we don't necessarily, and I had my mom in the beginning. I appreciate that, because I know that there are men going through this, and not necessarily just gay men that are doing it on their own. There's heterosexual men as well. And I think that they will appreciate us welcoming them to the conversation and validating the fact that men can do it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I had I would love to do a follow-up anthology of some of those stories. I don't know if it will happen. I don't know who those people are and whether they want to share their stories, but hey, I'm telling you, maybe people will hear about it.
Mali, you just put
Yeah.
it out in the universe. It's manifested, and we just need to attract it. So define the narrative is not gender specific. So calling all men. Let's get volume 2 going. We'll work on it for you, Mali. We'll see how quickly we can get it going. It also has a most beautiful cover. Tell us a little bit about the artwork.
Yeah, so the cover design, so the art itself, like the painting that is the base of the cover design, comes from another choice parent in Canada. She submitted her art and said she'd love to make that her contribution rather than writing. She made this piece. And then it was designed by Bain Design. She took this piece of art and kind of we're thinking about diversity of stories and all of the various ways that people become parents. And so that led to this kind of rainbow of colors to give us the cover.
I mean, just absolutely gorgeous. This is just one project. You actually have your own publishing company that our listeners might be interested in. Share a little bit about your custom publishing.
Yeah, sure. So I launched Next Gen Story Custom Publishing in order to help families capture their memories in print. So I help families create beautiful family history books and or publish their memoirs. I started it when I helped publish my grandmother's book years ago, and I just love that work. It is very rewarding, and yeah, I'm happy to connect with folks on that as well if they're interested in.
And they can find that contact information on your website as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's at Next Gen Story. So it's NEXTGEN Story.
Great. And we'll make sure that we put all of those links in the description for this episode of the podcast. And before we wrap things up, Mali, it's February of 2022. And I know it just seems like a project that you did to support you during the season. But when you think 5 years down the road and 10 years down the road, what do you see this anthology's impact, and where do you see this topic in 5 years and in 10 years?
Really interesting. I hope this anthology sparks more anthologies like this. So I hope 5 years from now, we look back and say, this is one of many, and that there are so many people doing this work and telling these stories that we're able to find these stories everywhere we look. So I hope that's the case 5 years from now. Yeah, and 10 years from now, I don't know. I mean, I think some of what you said is really interesting. When you redefine the narrative, and you look back, you start to realize that the areas where we were pushing boundaries are now the norm. So I think 10 years from now, we'll be looking at this book and saying, yeah, of course, to many of these stories. That's my hope, at least. So
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
going to be the norm, and we're going to realize, wow, back then they were really pushing the boundaries, and it'll be hard for younger folks who weren't really thinking about it now to really fathom it. I think that's why I continue to have deep gratitude for the folks that go before us, because for them, they were just doing what they felt like they need to do in life. And they really did take that courageous step to open up a pathway. I know for me, if it hadn't have been for something for me to find out there, to grab onto, to find what I knew was craving inside of me, right? So hopefully it will not be so challenging for folks to grab onto.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's interesting because as you say that, I think part of it